Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
This is an encore presentation of Faith and Sports with your hosts John Acquaviva and Ed Billick. Tune in to hear Faith and Sport live Monday afternoons from 2 to 3 right here on Carolina Catholic Radio Charlotte, AM 1270.
John, how are you on our first show here on Carolina Catholic Radio? How you doing?
I'm doing all right, buddy. I'm really excited to be here. I have been looking forward to this for weeks. In fact, we called it our premiere show, but we kind of cheated on that, didn't we? Remember at the men's conference back in the spring?
Right, March, we
were on the air from St. Patrick's Cathedral. We did a 2-hour. It was a 2-hour show that day, wasn't it?
I think it sure was. Yeah.
Yeah. So we kind of introduced the show to the Carolina Catholic radio listeners. Yeah. And so we brought it and we explained why we're doing it. But let's do that again here right now to get us started in the conversation about why we're doing this sport. Why we're doing this is two things, right? One is that sports is an integral part of daily society all over the world, right? There's the World Cup in several sports, including the Women's World Cup that just got done, where there's millions of viewers at the stadiums, on TV, baseball, the Super Bowl. We all know those statistics, crazy amount. It's just a part of our everyday life, and it's from youth sport through high school, college, and pro sports, and all these recreational sports that men and women play well into their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and so forth. So we know that sports is a big deal. But one of the things that JP2 did, the great John Paul II, when he was Pope, his reign ended in 2005, and a year before he died, he instituted what was called the Office of Church and Sport. And really what he wanted to do was he wanted to directly tie in our Catholic faith to the world of sport. So whether you are a coach, an athlete, or administrator, he wanted to weave into the conversation, and that's what we're going to do here. Morality, character, and ethics, at least on a somewhat of a regular basis. It's going to be a regular sports show for sure. So if you want to hear about the week in sports, the weekend in sports in particular, join us each and every Monday here at 2 o'clock. But one of the things that we want to do is talk about some of the ethics and the morality that are involved in the world of sport.
And you know, it's great, John, since the beginning of time. Men, women, kids love to play games, and it brings people together.
Right.
Sports brings people together. There's no politics. There's no, I'm for this, for this side of the aisle or that side of the aisle. It's people coming together to enjoy the world of sports, and we try to merge that love that we have for sports plus the love we have for our Catholic faith, and it works very well. And we have a little history going together, don't we?
We do, brother. Even though this is our first show here on Carolina Catholic Radio, it was 1 year ago this month. In fact, almost to the day that we signed off on Radio Maria. It's one of the many affiliates in the Catholic radio world. I think we're on in 13 different cities there. And we were on there for a year and a half as a duo, doing the same show, Faith and Sport, but it was not on here in North Carolina or South Carolina. We were on in New York, we were on in Wisconsin, Texas, Louisiana, and so forth. But this is really neat for both you and I because we're both local guys. We both go to St. Matt's. That's our home parish in Charlotte. And we did this for a year and a half, and so we took a year break, and here we are again. And I have a big smile on my face.
We had some wonderful guests, and we hope some of them will rejoin us. Just outstanding people. Many you'll recognize. Many you'll become new fans of. The Holy Goalie. I always talk about Bishop Paparocki in Chicago. He practices his goaltending for
every Thursday night, in fact.
Right, and he's the bishop out there in Peoria, Illinois, and he hears confessions in the penalty box.
I think that was part of a YouTube video, but that was kind of a joke. But no, he was great.
Tremendous guest we've had, and today we have another guest, and we'll hold off on that. So, John, a little bit about yourself for the audience here. A family guy, I know, but tell us about born and raised in that whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. I'm from the city of Detroit. I was born and raised on the east side there. During my college years, I moved out here to the East Coast, and I've settled here in the Charlotte area. I'm about to start my 11th year at Wingate University. I'm a PhD. I teach exercise science on a daily basis at the college there. And to this day, people still say, Wingate? Is that in South? Where's Winthrop again?
Winthrop, that's Rock Hill.
Rock Hill, exactly. And a lot of people confuse it with that. But no, I teach exercise science.
And for you local people, it's called Wingate.
Wingate, that's right. Very good. People are like, did he just say Wingate? But yeah, that's what I do. I live in Matthews, and with my wife Alicia, and we have 4 kids: Claire, Luke, Abigail, and Grace, and their ages 4 and 9. 4 to 9, I should say.
Wonderful.
Yeah. How about you, brother?
Born and raised outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 32 years with Frito-Lay in operations management. Put myself through broadcasting school. And now 8 years part-time at News Talk 1110 WBT here in Charlotte. Do a little sports. I'm also David Chadwick, who is a faithful pastor here in town. I'm his producer. Awesome. I backfill for other folks there doing sports and such. But like you, a member of St. Matthew's, involved with Christ Renews His Parish.
Very good.
We can talk that on another show. But it's bringing people to God, which I think it's all of our responsibilities as disciples of God. But do that, run a beach house down with my brother down in South Carolina. Mom still lives up there in Pittsburgh. She'll be turning 90 next month. Married to my beautiful wife, Jackie, now for 37 years. We have a son who's a practicing attorney in Austin, Texas, and a daughter. Her and her husband are expecting their first child in October. She works at Red Ventures, which is a digital marketing firm here in Charlotte, and he's a VP for Citizens Bank. So just a wonderful son-in-law, a great family, and a great future ahead for all of us.
Awesome. Now, you mentioned your mom. She's up in the Pittsburgh area. And she's in you and I have something in common. Both our moms are in nursing homes, right? Assisted living homes. And you have a story about the last time you went and visited your mom.
Past 2 or 3 times, I looked across the hall, and there's a ex-NFL football player who resides there, and I spent a little time getting to know him. Matter of fact, I thought he passed years ago, but he's still doing extremely well. But he passed away this past weekend. Bert Retchichar. He played for the Baltimore Colts and for a couple of other NFL teams. Sure. But his notoriety back in the 50s was they put him in. He was primarily a defensive back, but they put him in 1953 to kick a field goal. They need someone to kick it. 56 yards.
Is that true?
He broke the NFL record in 1953 for a 56-yard field goal. He erased the record set 19 years ago by Glenn Personnel, the Detroit Lions.
There you go.
And then, of course, a lot of us know that Tom Dempsey then broke it for the New Orleans Saints. But, he played for the Steelers, the Browns. But the fun thing about Bert is you get a little conversation going about football. And, God bless him in your later years with a little Alzheimer's. His face would light up. He'd tell great stories. He'd shake your hand, give you a little wink. Just a professional. And sad to hear that he passed away over the weekend. But Bert Retchichar, God bless you. May you rest in heaven. Go see my dad. He used to drink at your bar called the Extra Point, and maybe he'll buy you a beer up there in heaven.
The Extra Point, it should have been called the 56-yard field goal. The Extra Point, that's from 13 yards away or something. Man, give the guy credit.
So a little love for him.
That's really neat.
You were in Detroit recently?
That's right, man. That's my hometown. I mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, I was born and raised in Detroit, and I was back in Detroit for the first time in 11 years, and it was a highlight for a couple of reasons. One, I get to spend time with my brother Dave. He's my next oldest brother. I'm one of 7, and his family, and that was really neat. He lives just outside of the city of Detroit. And a second thing was I got a chance for the first time in those 11 years to visit with my 3 high school friends. In fact, one guy, Gary, goes all the way back to grade school. Assumption Grotto, I got to mention that. And then my 2 other St. Clement friends, Jerry Ulowitz and Scott Cesney, the 3 of us got together and we just laughed and giggled like
were you altar boys or choir boys together?
Well, I was an altar boy. My guess is Scott and Jerry were. I don't think Gary ever was, though. But yeah, we all went to Catholic grade school. We all went to Catholic high school. In fact, our Cathlete of the week, I'll even mention this, is Joe DeLamiere, and he went to Michigan State University, of course, played for 13 years in the NFL, blocked for O.J. Simpson, including he's in the Hall of Fame. But he went to St. Clement High School, and so did the 2 aforementioned friends, Jerry Ulowitz and Scott Cesney.
Of course, Joe's much, much older than them.
He is, yeah.
He must have left a legend there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Those guys had big spikes to fill, but I thought that was really neat seeing those guys. And the third highlight was we went to this monastery in which Solanus Casey was a monk. And it's called the Benedictine Monastery in the inner city of Detroit. And it's in a really rough area of the city, but it's a pilgrimage site. It's not just a church and not just a place to go visit. It's considered a pilgrimage site. Do you know much about Solanus Casey?
No, not at all.
He's blessed, and he at his that's
the before you become a saint.
That's right. And he had his mass to become blessed 2 years ago at Ford Field Oh, there was 70,000 people there.
Detroit Lions.
Talk about a man that impacted a lot of people. Anyway, there's a lot
probably have more there than a Lions game. They haven't been to Super Bowl.
I don't think that's possible. The Lions are just that good. It's hard to
continue. I'm sorry I threw you off.
No, that was great. Those are the three highlights: seeing my buddies, Solanus Casey pilgrimage, and then spending time with my brother. So that was really good stuff.
Beautiful. It all starts with family. That's for sure.
It all does, brother. Hey, listen, we got Carlos Herrera. He's going to call in here in a couple minutes, join us for a conversation, in particular, about how parents should respond to a coach when the kid's not playing, and some of the other things I think that coaches like Carlos has with parents. So we'll have that conversation in a couple of minutes. But first, let's do our weekend headlines. Major League Baseball, I think it was headlined by the Hall of Fame class came in. There was 2 points of note. I thought it was anchored by Mariano Rivera being inducted. I think he's maybe one of the greatest pitchers ever. Certainly is considered the greatest reliever ever. But I thought the other story was this is one of the first times in history, at least in recent history, that a player, especially a young player, was not there to be inducted. Roy Halladay died in a plane accident a couple years ago, and his wife, Brandy, made the acceptance speech, and she was present for him. And I thought that was really moving.
She talked about the humanity, how we all make errors and all make mistakes, and it was a moving little talk. Go back and watch it. We had of course Harold Baines, Edgar Martinez, Mike Mussina, Lee Smith, and of course Mariano Rivera. That was a nice class. The Hall of Fame did. Did you see the introduction of the 58 living members that came out?
No, I didn't see that.
Always enjoy that.
I know it's great.
Sandy Koufax.
Who else?
Brooks Robinson.
Yeah, love it.
One of my favorite. They always compare every great play at third base to Brooks Robinson, and the man was there, Hank Aaron. Henry Aaron, and hobbling out there a little bit. Bob Gibson's not there, Tom Seaver's not there. They're all dealing with health issues, and the great Willie Mays. Hopefully, we see him sometime soon.
Absolutely.
But he's we're all getting older, John. He's as well as our.
Are you rubbing it in, or are you just mentioning?
Yeah, we're just talking about.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
We got a young guy over here. He looks like he's 12 years old watching the show here behind the glass.
I think he might resent the 12-year-old.
We do want to give a shout out right now to our producer, Chris. He's behind the glass, pushing all the buttons, making us sound good. Thank you, Chris.
I'm just happy. In fact, I'll always thank Chris just because he made because he got Sing 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 on the air. I love that song.
Go ahead, Chris.
It's great to be here on the premier edition of Faith and Sport radio show, and hopefully we'll be here each and every Monday afternoon at this time on Carolina Catholic Radio here on WCGC AM 1270.
I love he's got the spot there. He's got the radio voice
he's ready to go there.
Wonderful. What else we got going on?
The Open winner. It kind of bothers me to call it the Open because there's a lot of Opens.
The Irish Open?
Yeah.
No, but it really wasn't the Irish
Open. Royal
Open.
Portrush, Northern Ireland. Anyway, Sean Lowry was the winner. A local guy. He won by 6 strokes over Tommy Fleetwood. I thought he dominated.
Folks, if you watch that tournament, the smile on his face.
I know. That was a genuine Northern
Irish smile.
He was the
happiest guy I've ever seen.
It was great. In the NBA, I thought you and I both agreed off air that we've never seen as much player movement, at least big player movement, in such a small period of time. Just to give you those highlights, folks, Russell Westbrook went to the Rockets. Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant went to the Nets. Chris Paul to the Thunder. Kawhi Leonard and Paul George to the Clippers. Now, if you don't recognize any of those names, you're not a fan of the NBA.
Anthony Davis to the Lakers.
Anthony Davis to the Lakers. And in fact,
Walker to the Celtics.
I know. That's what's crazy about it.
One after the other.
I wasn't even going to mention those guys. That's how big this list is. But I thought this is really big. But you know what was interesting is for the first time in about 3 months, the chatter around NBA was kind of quieted over the weekend. I think for a couple of reasons, right? Baseball's in full swing, had the Open and so forth. The Hall of Fame for Cooperstown occurred this weekend. But I think mainly it was because all the trades have been made. I mean, these are big trades, brother. These teams are going to change.
It will change the landscape of the NBA.
Oh, there's no question about it. But to tell the truth, it's hard to keep track of it because some of them are just switching from one team to the other. They're just literally switching jerseys.
Well, they say, John, you need 2 star players on your team. And whether it be David Robinson or Tim Duncan, and Duncan and Tony Parker, all these teams need 2 stars. And these teams are loaded up with 2 stars, except the New Jersey Nets. Kevin Durant will be out for a year.
Sure, I know. That's a whole thing worth talking about.
But every one of these teams are loading up with 2 stars. And I tell you, look out L.A. Clippers.
I know. There's somebody to be contented with for sure. I know. I just want to talk about the KD thing, but maybe we can get to it a little later on the show. It's just amazing to me that they're going to pay a guy $41 million to sit out with a Achilles injury.
Hopefully, he's donating a lot of that money to charities.
You said every team needs 2 stars. That's exactly what I have. I have you and Chris. That's why this show's going to be great.
That's wonderful,
folks. If you're just joining us, I'm Dr. John Acquaviva, co-hosted by Ed Billick. This is Faith in Sport. Listen, if you have a question for us regarding the world of sport, especially as it relates to character, ethics, or morality, you can email me at faithandsport@wingate.edu. And it's AND in there. So it's faithandsport@wingate.edu. And I think everybody knows how to spell Wingate but most people, of course, in the area say Wingate, so they might not put the E in there.
Spell it for us, will you? WINGATE.edu. So send me an email if you have a question about, I don't know, what we do, where we're from, anything in the world of sport. And then suggestions, too, because before the show, we had a national audience, and we couldn't really cater to the local flavor, whether it be Charlotte Catholic High School or, St. Matt's Grade School. I mean, we can cater to some of these local Catholic sports programs and really have fun. If you maybe know a guest or a coach or somebody who's a devout Catholic that you'd love to have come on, or just a man of faith or a woman of faith, we'd love to be able to interview them. So
absolutely, yeah. So use that email address to let us know what you'd like to see on the future show, somebody that you'd like to have on the future show. All right, that's our weekend headlines. We've got a bunch more stuff coming up in the show, but let's do this. Let's go to our guest.
Sure.
He's been on the show before on our national show on Radio Maria, but let's bring Carlos Herrera on. He is a certified youth soccer coach, and one of the reasons he has great insight, does Carlos, is that he used to be a youth minister for a church up in Northern Virginia. He's got great stories because he was a coach for some of the CYO teams up there, and unfortunately those stories are interesting, but they can kind of bring you down a little bit about Catholic parents and so forth. But let's bring him on. Carlos Herrera, welcome to the show. How you doing, buddy?
Hi, guys. How are you?
Hey, Carlos.
This is great you're here, my man. In fact, Carlos, when we were preparing for the show, literally 2 months ago, I said, who can be our first guest? And it took me maybe around 20 seconds. I said, I want Carlos Herrera on for the show because you have great stories, and, Carlos, you have great insight on how parents basically should handle certain situations. But let's do this. Because you're a big soccer guy, and this story is on the cover of Sports Illustrated right before Ed here. Before we get into that conversation about youth sports and parenting and so forth and working it out with coaches, I want to hear your thoughts, Carlos, overall on the American women winning the World Cup.
Well, John, thanks for having me on the show. I can't tell you how excited I am to be part of this show for you and Ed on your first show, your Starship show. So, very excited.
We appreciate you being here, buddy.
Thanks. So, for one, very excited the women's team winning the World Cup. It's exciting if you're a parent of a young girl who's playing, whether she's already playing soccer or interested in soccer or in high school in soccer or college in soccer, and for women's sports in general in the U.S. I think it's something to be very proud of and quite an accomplishment. They're a 4-time winner of the World Cup.
That's right.
And that's the record in terms of women's teams. So it's very exciting. Politics aside, and all the political expressions and controversy in there, which I am not a fan of when it comes to sports. The soccer aspect of it is amazing, impressive, and something to look up to.
Now, I know it interfered people's everything from watching the games to cheering them with full expression. It didn't bother you at all, the kind of the off the field disruption, or
Well, I didn't really say that. I said I said it was very exciting.
The play was
accomplishment.
Yes.
But politically, John, I think you and I kind of feel the same thing. Sports is one of those aspects of life that I think you can keep it within the realm of importance that it serves, an accomplishment, and it has a certain place. And I don't think it rises up to that level where we should be using sports to kind of convey personal support or objections to what's going on politically. That's on the field. I'm very against that.
No, I hear you, and I appreciate you saying that because that mirrors what Ed and I were talking about before the show began. Now, switching to youth sports, Carlos, I always think you have great stories when you come on the show and you and I talk off air and so forth. But put this in perspective. Talk about, Carlos, when you were youth minister, it was St. John's and McLean, correct?
It was St. Luke and McLean.
St. Luke, McLean, that's right. And tell us the experience you had, just briefly, about what you experienced, because that was really your first time with coaching and in coaching in a Catholic atmosphere, correct?
Yes. Now, mind you, to preface this, and no hard feelings between the churches that were involved or even the people, but I was out of college, had been a youth minister maybe a year, had given up my full-time professional job working for a government contractor on the Beltway, had really dedicated myself to be a youth minister, and you don't get paid a lot as a youth minister in the Catholic Church, so I worked as a part-time PE teacher, part-time youth minister, which was a great collaboration from, my athletic interests and my faith and development. And yeah, it was an annual event that the school has. It was an 8th grade game, and they called it the I don't know if it was I forget the name of the cup, but it was the something cup.
Sure. And
it really was played between St. Joe's and Great Falls and St. Luke and McLean.
Got it.
And as a Catholic, as a youth minister, I was very, very into my faith, and I would say because I was young, also a little naive of what the real life was like. And as a PE teacher, I thought, what a fantastic expression of, two Catholic schools, playing to win a cup of sorts, and this should be fun. Well, the long and short of it was a complete shock to me as this new, innocent young adult excited about faith and athletics. And to sum it up, the referee, I had to apologize to the referee, who was a young person themselves, could have been maybe more than 20 years old, could have even been 18 or 16 years old. He was just a volunteer ref. The parents had argued so badly amongst themselves and towards and yelling at the ref because one team was awarded a penalty kick, I think, and at the very end, which changed the game. And throughout the whole game, there were several parents who, both the way they treated the referee and the way they treated some of the kids and the opposition and their own kids, I was brought to tears at the end of the game. I went home and it just shocked me that in a Catholic environment with kids that you could see that kind of behavior, and it just kind of opened my eyes that when people get involved in whatever it is they believe, whether it's their kids, their school, whatever, it can turn ugly very easily.
Yeah, a whole lot to be said about that. Folks, you're listening to Carolina Catholic Radio. This is Faith and Sport. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva, co-hosted here by Ed Billick. On the phone with us right now is Carlos Herrera. He's a certified youth soccer coach up in Northern Virginia area. Let's switch to something a little more specific. That story you told, I really hope, one of the reasons I wanted you to tell it, in fact, the main reason I wanted you to tell it, is too many times parents don't go home and look in the mirror after any type of competition, whether it's Little League, through high school, even college. And I think that putting it more in perspective and taking a look in the mirror on how they reacted, would really be doing themselves a service, because youth sport can be a really dynamic and positive thing, and too often it's not, as you experienced. But let's talk about something I think the parents out there will really be interested in knowing about. Carlos, as you are well familiar with and as you've experienced, one of the big issues for a youth coach of any sport is playing time. There's kids on the bench, there's kids that barely make the squad and so forth. Help us put this in perspective and give us some advice for the parents in particular if your kid is not receiving the playing time they think they should have.
John, that question is asked all the time, and I think every coach deals with it in some level or another. And that is, it really, sort of cuts to the core of the inherent conflict in any sports with coaching and parents and coaching and kids that play on your team is what's more important? Is it important to win or is it important to develop? And that really becomes the crux in terms of how people judge whatever it may be, right? And in youth sports, one of the United States Soccer Federation does a license called a youth license, and they basically emphasize that coaching to win is a very detrimental philosophy for youth sports. It really should be, until you get into the collegiate level, and maybe even very competitive high school, it really should be coached to develop. And that creates the conflict, because if a coach gets judged on how good a coach they are by the winning, then the coach is going to want to play the better players. Right? And parents want to win. Kids want to win. So it's a very countercultural role that you're asking a coach to perform. That is, if you're there to develop, then every kid should get the same amount of playing time.
That's right.
But the reality of it is, if you play Johnny, who is, not very fast and doesn't have great skills, and you put him on the outside so he doesn't get involved, or if you put him as a central defender to get experience as a central defender, and he lets a goal go through because he's not very good, and that has happened to me, and you lose, then, the kids aren't happy with him, some parents aren't happy, you're not happy. So it's a constant struggle. Now, if you were to say, what does a parent do? The parent has to have a clear understanding. If the coach has that understanding, are they there to develop, or are they there to win? If they're there to win and your child isn't very good, it's going to be it's going to put you in conflict with the coach's philosophy. So understanding the coach's philosophy, I think, is important. Having a conversation with a coach about what that philosophy is and what is their interpretation or definition of, playing time, because they will tell you, if they're honest, they'll tell you, I'm going to only play the good kids, or I'm only going to roll in the kids that aren't so good in scrimmages or something like that. You'll understand that. And I think that becomes the heart of it. And having the kid understand that is also very important.
Is it the responsibility of the parent to then communicate that to their son or daughter, or do you think that's part of the responsibility of the coach? Like, in other words, does the coach owe it to the player to be explained, at least in some detail, why they're not playing?
Well, in my mind, that's the whole responsibility of the coach, because if you're a youth coach, your job is really to develop players, and part of developing players is feedback. Now, you and I both know that the ideal, which is similar to my experience having two Catholic schools play each other, the ideal isn't necessarily what is reality, right?
Sure.
And a coach has its own limitations. They may be hired. They don't. They might have a whole variety of different agenda. But the coach really should be the one that explains it. Now, that also takes a lot of courage for any individual to tell a kid, you're not good enough,
right,
and until you develop this, that, and the other, you're not going to play. And that's also expecting psychologically a lot more of the parent, of the coach. So I think in youth soccer, parents should be involved. They should understand. They should help communicate. Even if the coach doesn't really explain it, a parent a lot of times can see that their son or daughter is not as good as they think they are, right? And, that might help. And eventually a conversation between the parent and the coach should occur if it becomes a real problem.
What do you mean a real problem?
So the real problem is either the child never plays, or the child constantly complains about the lack of playing time and feels it's unfair, or the coach favors somebody or other people. And again, those situations happen frequently out in the field.
Of course. Now, one of the things you and I have talked about off air, and you were a guest on the previous show on Radio Maria, so we might have chatted about there too, but you told this great story, and actually it was through an example of sometimes the parent needs to be told specifically, along with the player, the son or the daughter, in a separate or same conversation on specifically what they should be working on, one, and two, that even if they worked on that and got say that and saw some improvement, it's still quite possible that, in fact, likely if they're sitting on the bench, that they still would not see much playing time, correct?
That's correct, yes. Unfortunately, when you're a coach and when you're a professional coach, you're usually coaching more than one team, right? So you're usually coaching, there were coaches I knew that were coaching 4 teams a week.
Jeez.
So that's a lot of kids, it's a lot of parents, it's a lot of playing time, it's a lot of lesson plans, it's a lot of, who's going to play what positions, your roster. And so, a lot of times coaches are thinking of how can we better our opponent. And so even though a child's been told this is what you should improve on, and let's say they have a conversation with a parent about that, it doesn't necessarily mean that the coach will notice that, remember that, see that. And, unfortunately, it's that whole adage, the first impressions are very important.
Right.
Sometimes once the coach has an impression, whether it's positive or negative about a child, sometimes it's very hard to overcome that. And in some instances, I've told some parents, listen, if you're not happy, then you have 2 options. You either find a team where you have a coach that has a different philosophy, or maybe it's a skill question, right? Maybe the child would be better with players that are either better than he is or as good as he is, or in the other case, less, where he would be one of the better ones on a team, which could be the difference between travel soccer and house soccer.
That's right.
So there are a variety of ways to handle it, but it's very hard. It's just a difficult conversation for all 3 of the participants.
No. In fact, but you're bringing a lot of stuff in the conversation, and I bet all the parents out there listening right now are getting something out of this. We're talking to Carlos Herrera, certified youth soccer coach. He's from the Northern Virginia area. You're listening to Carolina Catholic Radio. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva, co-hosted here by Ed Billick. Carlos, let me leave us with an answer to this question. And we didn't talk about this off air, so it's going to be a little bit from left field, but certainly along the lines of our conversation. Outside of what we talked about, playing time and conversations with the coach and so forth, how to approach the coach, what's the biggest don't to avoid? What's the biggest thing a parent can avoid as just, not necessarily with the coach, but as the parent of an athlete? What's the number one thing that they should avoid that you've witnessed on a regular basis?
Well, I would say one of the factors that creates a significant amount of resistance or negative emotions or negative issues on the field, and I would say, and John, you can correct me on this, but I would say that in almost every sport where youth are playing, in soccer, one of the famous sort of, if you want to call stereotypes, that you have is the parent on the sideline telling the kid what to do, right? And yelling at the kid as the parent's running down the field following the kid, yelling at the kid what to do, right?
Sure.
I think we all have either experienced it or seen it, but you can easily identify it. That is the most negative thing that could possibly happen on a field. And today, I know in one of the counties, cities that I coached for, the parents had a sign that they would not say anything during games to their players. And that's very hard to do when you're type A or when you want your son to succeed or you feel that you have an expertise, because that could be in complete conflict to whatever the goal or the plan of the coach is for that day. And then it creates the kid where he has to make, determine, do I follow what my parents says or do I follow what the coach says?
That's right.
So that creates a lot of conflict that doesn't necessarily need to be there. And I think you can find that in any sport. They should just let him play, let him experience, let him fail, let him miss the shot, or however, without being so negative.
Boy, you came through there, brother. You could have went anywhere with that, and that is an excellent response to that question. And you're right. You're going against possibly what the coach is saying, right? If they're telling them what to do, when to do it, and so forth. In other words, they're maybe changing the strategy by running up the sideline and telling the kid what to do. But the other thing is maybe even bigger, and you touched on this, and study after study shows this. Children up to through high school don't want their parents to say anything. And when they do, they feel increased pressure. especially, and this is before or during the play happens, before an at-bat, before a free throw. Just sit on your hands. Carlos, you brought good stuff to us, brother, but this, as always, leads to the next thing, and that is you got to come on again, and there's so many things to talk about in the audience that we have and the audience that we're going for, because we want to improve the ethics, the morality, the character of the game. We want you to come back and talk more about this, but that's all we have time for today, brother. Thank you very much for coming on.
John, I enjoyed it. Love to be on again, and I love talking about this. So thank you for having me on.
We appreciate it, buddy. You take care. Well, there you go, Ed. That was good stuff. What was the big thing he said that you thought was so cool?
You know, as parents, we have the opportunity to positively or negatively impact our children's athletic career. And let the coaches coach, let the parents parent.
That's right.
And that's exactly how he described it. And many of you listening probably say, yep, he's right on, or no, I need to be more. Well, when you're back at the house, you can have your little coaching sessions. But again, you got to honor they're the most important people in an athlete's career. Listen to Hall of Fame speeches.
That's right.
The parents, thank you, Dad, for this. Thank you, Mom, for taking me practices or playing with. And Coach, my Little League coach, my high school coach, my college coach, because do the parents' thing and then do the coach's thing as well. So.
Yeah, no, that was a great point. Boy, he hit that one out of the park, because there's been more and more research just in the last few years. There's people in a related field to mine, exercise science. They study what's called sport management, and they study so many things that are involved with sport, but not necessarily the X's and O's. And one of the things that these researchers and sociologists and psychologists are right along this line as well, and they study what type of impact do the parents have on the outcome of the game, but in particular, what impact do they have on the overall demeanor of the game? And Carlos touched on something important. When parents are negative, the players themselves of those parents tend to be negative too. In other words, if the parent gets on the referee, those same kids, even if they're 7 and 8 year olds, they'll get on the umpire or the referee themselves.
Sure.
If they're negative on the coach, they'll get negative to their coach. It's amazing how there's a correlation, but really not a surprise to any.
Folks, if you like the little discussion with our guest, let us know. And, John, you can let us know how to get a hold of you specifically as host of the show. But we're going to have more and more guests like that.
That's right.
That'll talk the morality and the virtues and values of sharing our Catholic faith into coaching mode, but also administrators and other people involved in the sporting world. John, how can they give us feedback?
Absolutely. Anytime, you can email me at faithandsport, that's A-N-D, faithandsport at wingate.edu. Or we have 20 minutes left in the show if you want to leave a question with Chris, or you can come live on the show, ask Ed or I a question, or get a conversation started about something that's happened to you or you experience on a regular basis. You can call 704-596-4900. Before we go any further, I want to give a big thank you and shout out to David Papandrea. I know he's listening right now. David is the one who got Carolina Catholic Radio started.
After how many years of hard work and his passion for this?
I don't want to be too errant on how many years he's been working on it, but I think it's around 4 years total. And after 3 years plus, it finally came on the air this spring. It was in March. And here we are on the radio waves talking about what we love to talk about.
On the radio waves, but also your iPhone is your radio.
That's right.
I mean, we got that app. The app is so useful anywhere in the world. You can listen to this show, listen to Carolina Catholic Radio, and tied in with EWTN. There's just such quality shows that the Carolina Catholic Radio is broadcasting, not only on the airways, but through the internet as well.
Very good. Again, thank you, David Papandrea, to bring Carolina Catholic Radio.
Reset. Who are we? What are we doing here on your radio here on this Monday afternoon?
I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. I teach exercise science at Wingate University. I have a PhD. I talk about how to get bigger, stronger, and faster. I teach people how to become personal trainers, strength and conditioning coaches, and so forth. And I love sport.
Why do we do the show, though?
And we love sport. You and I met through St. Matt's. In fact, it was through a mutual friend. And I thought one of the best things going in the world today is sports. And one of the things I have great passion about is our faith. And I thought, what better way to bring it together into conversation than on a radio show? And so you and I put this idea together. And, we keep working on it from week to week. But we think we deliver, for the most part, in that people are hearing what they want to hear. They want to hear sports, but they also want to hear how character, morality, and ethics can be weaved into the conversation.
Before we go forward, and you're going to see where we're headed next, we always say a prayer before the show.
That's right.
To St. Sebastian.
That's right.
St. Sebastian?
That's right.
That's a parish in Belle Vernon, Pennsylvania. St. Sebastian. Never heard of the guy.
I've never heard of a parish, St. Sebastian, but St. Sebastian is the patron saint of athletes. In fact, he was thought to be a great archer.
Yes.
I think it was in the Renaissance period. I guess when there was a lot more archers than there are today.
He was physically fit and able to withstand long physical endurance, and he is the patron saint of sports. So if you want to say a prayer, we all want to pray. Lift up a prayer in veneration of St. Sebastian.
That's right.
Check him out.
He'll guide you to how you have to act both as a parent, a coach, a referee, administrator, or an athlete. All right, that's good stuff. Again, thank you for our guest who even that conversation carried on beyond his interview. But that was Carlos Herrera. He is a certified youth soccer coach in the Northern Virginia area. So thank you, Carlos, for those words of wisdom. Let's do this now, brother. The hit and miss. This is something Ed and I have been doing for a couple of years now. And this is where we talk about something that was a positive or a negative in the world of sport, and maybe how it might impact people beyond the field. So why don't you go first, brother?
Being a sports memorabilia person, number one, the 1979 Pittsburgh Pirates were honored at PNC Park. And again, I'm a homer here with this, as they celebrated Willie Stargell and We Are Family. And, of course, you got some relationships with the late Willie Stargell. We'll save that for another show. Right. But that was a hit for me as they celebrated their World Series championship from 40 years ago. The way they've been playing, the way that franchise is going, it will probably celebrate the 50th and the 60th.
without any competition. Yeah.
And, hats off to Shane Lowry, the smile on his face, finished the Open, the Irish guy who traveled north to the golf course there. And I never seen someone so happy they won the tournament. So awesome. Hats off for him. How about you? Any hits or misses?
I do have a miss. Actually, it's a hit in this case, but it's in essence, it's like a miss weaved into it. But before we go on, tell everybody who you're a fan of. You mentioned the Pittsburgh Pirates. Tell us across the spectrum, like who are the people that over the years you've been a real big fan of?
Well, as a child, it would be Roberto Clemente.
Okay.
Now, of course, with the Penguins, Mario Lemieux.
Okay.
The Steel Curtain and the Steelers of the 70s.
So you're a Steelers fan? You're a Pirates fan?
Penguins fan.
San
Antonio Spurs fan in basketball, because I lived in San Antonio.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's easy to jump on their bandwagon because they're so good for so long. They're just ridiculous.
Great leadership, and also,
and Texas A&M, right?
Texas A&M, and of course now the Carolina Panthers, because we live here. So, variety, but black and gold's in the veins.
I like that. That's what I like to hear. Yeah, being a Detroit guy, we have the 4 major sports teams. I think my friend Scott is still listening. He stated something that was so funny. We were going back and forth this morning about the SEC in football, right? So him and I are going back and forth, and I'll stand right near my phone. He's near his phone, and we're just going back and forth. And he was just like, sometimes I get so tired, right? Like you could feel his frustration over the texting. I get so tired of the SEC, and it just dominates the conversation, and nobody's going to win but the SEC in football, either Georgia or Alabama, whoever it is. And I wrote to him, and I said, well, part of it is, Scott, that in most of those cities in the SEC, they don't have anything else. And for decades, they've had nothing else. There's no major sports teams other than probably a minor league team and single A ball or rookie ball down the street, right? Like in Alabama, what else is there, right? And he immediately wrote back and he said, well, actually, here in the Detroit area, there's no major sports teams either. And, of course, what we're referring to is, all subpar are the Tigers, the Lions, the Red Wings, and the Lions.
The Red Wings used to be like that.
Did I say all 4 teams? Anyway, I'm a fan of all 4 teams.
Pistons.
That's right. I said the Lions twice. But, the Pistons are in there as well. And
you should say the Lions twice for that.
That's right. I know, because they need so much help.
But go ahead.
But also the U of M, University of Michigan. Yeah, I'm a big college football fan. Excellent. I love college football in general. So anybody who listens to the shows, they're going to love this show.
So did we get your hit or miss for the weekend?
Here it is, brother. There was so little chatter about the NBA and all the moves that it made me excited. Because one thing we've talked about in the past here is how frustrating it is during both the Major League Baseball season and then when the end of the Major League Baseball season, football starts, and they're talking about other sports that aren't even playing yet. They're not even doing their preseason yet. And during the summer, I'm like, don't we see the box scores for baseball? I was so happy that all the chatter about the NBA, but as you and I talked just before we went on the air, there's no more trades to be made. Everybody was traded. If you look at like NBA websites, for instance, and all the trades that occurred, you would be shocked on all the moves that were made, either free agent signings or trades. It was astounding how many there were. And I was so happy not to hear it. And of course, part of it was the Hall of Fame, right? Baseball got elevated because of the Hall of Fame inductions. And hockey's off the board right now.
Well, NASCAR's hot right now.
NASCAR is a little bit of conversation, but the Open, whenever there's a major on, that takes up a lot of the conversation. And heck, the NFL, they started minicamp. Did you know that? Some of them started this past weekend, right. And within the next 3 or 4 days, they'll all start. And within the next 10 days,
training camp, preseason games will be coming up.
That's right. Oh yeah, it's coming up in a couple weeks. And then college football, they start their camps usually sometime in the first week of August.
At Mass yesterday, the priest said last weekend was the Good Samaritan. We talked Martha and Mary, and there's other things in life that are more important. And next week he's going to talk to our Father. So that's a tease for next Sunday.
There you go.
So we're going through the cycle just like the Catholic Church does.
I love it. I know it's cyclical, and so are we. So this is good. So yeah, that was my hit of the week, that we didn't have to listen to all this chatter about NBA, a sport that's still 5 months from tipping off.
Got a couple questions for you.
Let's hear it. We're going to do the quick Q&A.
Chris, we do the segment called Q&A with Dr. A.
That's
Dr.
right.
Acquaviva, of course. The Nets signing Kevin Durant, who's wounded.
He's wounded. That's right.
He's wounded.
He is wounded.
Play. Does that surprise you? I think you said earlier it surprises the money they threw at him.
Oh, yeah. I was actually borderline shocked with this signing. And I knew it was going to happen, but when it does happen, it's just a little more. You're like, I think somebody's going to sign him even though he's hurt. And let's talk about the injury for those who aren't familiar with the NBA.
Yeah, talk to us on the science of the injury.
He has a ruptured Achilles tendon. Of course, the Achilles tendon is what attaches your two muscles in your calf to your heel bone, right? And this allows us to, for instance, stand on our toes. So if we want to reach that can of peas on the top shelf, this is what helps us do it, right?
Is that what you eat? There's too much salt in that. You're a healthy guy. Can of peas?
Hey, I'm just using an example, man. I should have said can of corn. By the way, when there's an easy pop-up, do you know why they say can of corn? Did you ever hear this?
Of course, yeah.
Is because in the old shopping centers, when the woman or man would come by, they'd say, I want that can of vegetables up there. And the shelves were so high, they usually had a little stick, and they would bring it down, and it would fall into their hands or a basket. And so often those cans at the top were corn, and it was really easy to get if you had this stick.
He just made that up.
No, I
never heard that.
Absolutely. Chris, you could look that up, brother.
All right, continue with your thing here. Go ahead.
Surprised by the Nets. Anyway, this is the tendon, right?
And how long? I mean, it's severely
It's
injured.
a year. It's a year. It's the worst injury, and I mean this more than ACL injury, an injury to the knee, elbow. It's the worst injury that you can expect to come back from in
like
college.
When you sprain your ankle, a lot of us sprained our ankles.
Yeah.
It takes a while, and that ankle's never really the same again.
It could be. It's just that this takes so long just to get back to near 100%. Anyway, the shocker was they signed him for 4 years, including next year, for $41 million. He turned down the final year in his contract with the Golden State Warriors, in which he was going to make $31 million. But he just goes, no, there's more money to be made. Now, talk about confidence in your ability, right? Talk about the confidence in your ability, brother. He goes, no, I'm not going to accept this $30 million, which he could have accepted. Having a torn Achilles tendon, instead, he goes, I'm going to put it out there in free agency, and the Nets signed him for $160 million plus. He signed
Not the last time they made a stupid move. Hey, here's another one for you. Biggest surprise of the year. We're more than halfway through the Major League Baseball season. Yeah. The biggest surprise.
Very good. There's a couple. Before I get to my actual surprise, I have a couple on the honorable mention. One is the Twins. The Twins.
Nice.
Oh, yeah, this is a shocker to me. They're 60-38. They're 3 games ahead of, I was going to say the all-powerful Indians, but certainly virtually everybody picked the Indians to win again. They went to the World Series a couple years ago. Everybody thought they were going to the same
Third
team.
hottest team in the American League.
But they're hot right now. They are on the heels of those Twins, and that's a different story. But you're going to love my second honorable mention.
It's home runs.
Josh Bell.
Yeah.
This guy's having a tremendous year. He's hitting .289, and he had 84 RBIs at the All-Star break.
Yeah, there's some other fun facts in there, too.
About Josh Bell?
Yeah.
That guy's a giant, man. In fact, when I saw him play for the first time a couple years ago, this guy's going to be somebody.
In the offseason, Kevin Young spent a lot of time with him. He was an ex-Pittsburgh Pirate, played back in the 90s or 2000s. Guess who mentored his hitting style?
That's it.
Willie Stargell.
Is that right?
So he's learned a lot of things from Pops 40 years ago, but through Kevin Young, and changed the way his stance, his swing, and everything. Yeah, Josh Bell's the real deal.
But you know, here's the shame of it, and you and I both know this, being from smaller market teams.
I don't want to hear it.
Okay, what am I going to say? No. Tell me what I'm going to say.
Sign him to a long-term contract.
They need to sign him, but they probably won't.
No, don't have.
Yeah, sorry about that, brother. Sorry to ruin that. Anyway,
go ahead.
No, the biggest surprise are the A's.
The A's?
The A's are 26th on the payroll of 30 teams. In other words, every year.
Nice.
Ed, every single year, they're low on the totem pole for overall salary. And they're 57-43. There are a few games. The Astros are the hottest team.
And guess who they play tonight?
Who do they play
the
tonight?
Astros.
There you go. So they can make some ground there. I just appreciate Billy Beane and everything they do. And, of course, it was worth that movie a couple years ago.
They need a new stadium. You know what they bring?
Yeah.
You know when the players hit the field, what they come out with?
Let's hear it.
A can of Febreze. Really? Because
you just made that up like I made the can of corn up.
No, it's a Febreze. They got to get the stink out of the Oakland Coliseum.
Is there a stink there? Huh? What do you mean? Is there a stink there, or you mean they just
need a new stadium?
Stinks. They just need a new stadium. Yeah. But one of the reasons I like that stadium is that when there's a pop up, allows the first baseman and third baseman to actually get in shape because the foul area it's huge
because it's a football stadium.
Oh, well, yeah, exactly. You can play rugby there. I know you can play.
Hey, final question for you as we're getting close to the top of the hour here. Let's go. You talked with the coach on it. What's going to be the legacy of the Women's World Cup? I mean, just to put
in one word,
a bow on that.
Yeah. Controversy. I think it's going to be. There was controversy. I think they alienated a lot of people, and I have to admit. Full disclosure here, brother, is the last time they were in the World Cup, I was watching every minute I possibly could. This year, it was not so appealing to me. And it is because the stuff that, Coach Herrera and I were talking about in that little segment just a few minutes ago. But there, it started out with a 13-0 win. That was controversy in itself. They celebrated.
Run the score up, you're saying?
Well, I'm not even saying they did that, but I just thought it was somewhat odd. Scoring 8, 9, 10, 12, 13 goals, and then celebrating each goal as if they just
arrogance.
As if they just went ahead 1-0.
Humble. Yeah.
And what's interesting is people you talk to, they're 50-50 on that. They're like, celebrate each goal. And everybody else is like, that was a little embarrassing. So I understood why some people said, I hope they lose. There's many people I know that said that publicly. I hope they lose because they need to get that pin, in their balloon. Some air needs to go out of that. But, of course, they delivered. They won the whole thing. And, the goals to goals against was tremendous. And they were clearly the best team. And they delivered, despite all the distraction, even that they brought on themselves. So good for them ultimately. But I think it's going to be mired in controversy, at least in the short term.
With our last 7 minutes or so here, 6 minutes on the show, and thank you to Carolina Catholic Radio giving us the opportunity today for the first show ever. And I know as we start winding down, you had a couple more. Just again, want to thank our producer back there, Chris. Chris is pushing all the buttons, making us sound good here on Carolina Catholic Radio.
Absolutely.
How do we wrap up, and what do you have for us?
Well, we got a few minutes before we wrap up, but there was a thing I wanted to talk to you about that we kind of got away from, and we mentioned the Open already a couple times, but I thought this is worth discussing. What's your thought when you turn a major golf tournament on? It doesn't have to necessarily be a major; it just can be like a big one. But you off the air, it sounds like you have the same opinion about golf as I do. In other words, why didn't you like the Open, say, as much as you like the Masters or the U.S. Open?
First of all, I'm not a golfer. I mean, I'll go out and hit the ball around and have some fun and do that.
But you're a fan like me, right?
I'm a huge fan. So now I know, and I've known many years. When you get to the Open, it's not the aesthetically pleasing course like the Masters, like we have Quail Hollow here with the Wells Fargo. Looking at God's beauty with the trees and everything. But to the Open, whether it's in Scotland or Ireland or the Great Britain,
England,
you got to appreciate the beauty for what it is there. Yeah, it was 62, 54 degrees, rainy, windy, the ocean splashing.
You're like, what is this, December in Detroit?
And the links courses. I mean, but if you love the purity, then you have to sit back and appreciate it and twist your kind of thing. Do I enjoy it? Yes, I enjoy it. Not as much as the Masters because I've been there, the azaleas and all the beauty of the course. But anyhow, it's beauty unto its own.
So basically what you're telling our audience is you like flowers.
Well, flowers and the things that God gives us. I mean, do I like rocks and no flowers and no trees?
You like flowers. Okay, I'm gonna write that down. It's just in pencil, but I'm going to write that down.
There we go.
No, I agree with you. In fact, to tell the truth, I thought I was a little surprised by that because I thought I'm one of the few people that think that. But when I turn on the TV, I like to see trees. I don't want to see these links courses. But the one good thing about Northern Ireland course, unlike the Scottish courses, the grass was green.
Yeah, it was. It was. 2 minutes to go.
All right,
athlete.
Well, actually, let's do this first. The stat of the week, because we're just talking about golf. This was the first major ever, Ed, that Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson did not make the cut. In other words, when they're both playing, this is the first time. And that goes back to 1998. Now, by the way, there's been 3 other times that they both were in the tournament, or a tournament, and they didn't make the cut. But this was the first time in a major. Isn't that amazing?
No surprise, the guys are getting older like us.
Yeah, that's right. No, that really does show that that's coming to an end, right? Okay, we got 1 minute left, so let's do this. We talked about the Cathlete of the Week, and so we're going to do it. It's Joe DeLamielleure, and there's a couple reasons why, but the main reason why, he's a friend of the show. He's a former St. Matthew parishioner, and I just need to tell this 20-second story. When I approached him, I said, Joe, we're on Radio Maria. This is a year and a half ago. And I said, I'm on with Ed Billick. We're on this show. Will you be willing to come on? You know the first thing he said to me? Do you remember this story? He goes, I want to talk about the faith. I thought that was fantastic. He didn't want to talk about blocking for OJ. He didn't want to talk about being in the NFL for so long. He goes, I want to talk about the faith. In other words, don't cheat me out of talking about my Catholic faith. I thought that was fantastic. He was a friend of the show. He was on there several times, and he's always a great guest.
Sounds like a tease to me for a couple upcoming shows.
Absolutely.
Get Joe back on. I'm sure the folks here in Charlotte love to hear their native guy.
Absolutely. He was great. Brother, it's great to be back on the air with you. Thank you very much for doing this. By the way, folks, Ed's going to be leaving us soon. So if you or you know of somebody that would be willing to sit in that chair and be the co-host of the show, let me know at faithandsport@wingate.edu.
30 seconds. I tell you what, I'll coach whoever would love to come in and be John's host. I got other things going on, but we'll talk about that here in another show or two. How do you want to wrap this up?
Let's do this. Let's end it with a quote from our great Pope Francis. He said, in sport, as in life, competing for the result is important, but playing well and fairly is even more important. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. For Ed Billick, please join us next time here on Carolina Catholic Radio.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.